Professionals, what is your industry's version of, bring me blinker fluid, or find a snipe? I used to work in a diesel engine manufacturing plant. We would send new people to the parts gauge to get spark plugs. When I was in the army, I kept the LTE's Humvee deadline for a month, because the backup lights didn't work. I may get this a little wrong, because it's my dad's story, but when he was in the army, they would send the new guy to get the PRC-E7, pronounced prick E7, from the platoon sergeant, whose rank was also known as E7. So, my dad walks to his desk and says that he was told to find the prick E7. The sergeant, who was in on it, proceeds to yell and cuss at him for a while. When I was in the Marine Corps, I was in the Air Wing, as a repair squadron, as a tin bender. My sergeant told me to go to the supply building and get 100 feet of flight line. I already knew about this, since my buddy worked in supply. So, I said, "Sir, yes sir," and just spent 2 hours hanging out with buddy. When I get back, I pretend to be confused, and he has a good laugh. Win, win all around. I was Air Force, and the same thing out on the flight line. The prank wars were so damn funny. I miss it so much. Putting grease on the senior NCO's coffee mug rim, undoing bolts in his office chair, so, as soon as he would sit, it would fall apart and bust his ass. Then he would do the same thing to us randomly throughout the year along with the goose chases for the new guys. Good times. I was newly assigned to a unit in the Army, and me and another E4 got tasked to clean a classroom after a training session. He says, "Go down to supply, and ask Sergeant Chico for some floor cleaner." I said, "Okay," went down to supply and asked Chico for it, and he said, "We don't have any specific floor cleaner, do you want simple green?" We finally decided to both walk back upstairs, to get clarification. E4 sees us walk in, and starts laughing, like he's going to piss himself. Eventually, just gasps, "There's no such thing as floor cleaner," and leaves the room, still laughing. Chico looks at me and says, "Is he a re-road or something?" I said, "I didn't know, because I was new here." I worked at Best Buy in college, and we would have tell the new guy that when they clocked out, they needed to hit number 19 on the desk phone, and say they were leaving for the day, what they accomplished, and their favorite part of the day. We told them it was an automated time and labor tool that automatically clocked them out. Really, it called the store's intercom system, and blared it over the loudspeakers for everyone in the store. Pretty embarrassing, and gave all the rest of us a good chuckle. The best part, it was delayed, so they typically made it all the way across the store, until it started to play back. That's hilarious. We once told second lieutenant baby pilots that they were about to talk to their career manager, but they all had to be brief, and that she was listening. So, they had to say their name and rank, what they had learned at our squadron, and what type of aircraft they wanted to fly when they grew up, got trained. So, we would dial the PA system of the squadron next door, and handed them the phone, so they could all say their part, one after the other. This isn't going to all fit, go get the shelf stretcher. I've worked in retail, so I've used this one myself. We used to tell the new people to go ask the store manager for keys to the parking lot. Me setting up gas and air lines in the prenatal chemistry lab. "Hey new kid, go get me a roll of fallopian tubing." I saw this happen, and the guy came back with a female co-worker and said, "Sir, here is 2 rolls of fallopian tubing, still in the package." Best response. Alternatively, be a woman and say, "I got your fallopian tubing right here," and gesture rudely at your lower abdomen. I work on an airfield. We have the new guys stand outside, holding a piece of printer paper above their heads at night, so the air traffic controllers can calibrate the light gun. It's literally just a fancy flashlight. We had one guy stand out there for almost 20 minutes before he realized we were messing with him. You reminded me of a situation where I thought I was being hazed, but not at all. I was working on test bench for the A350, and someone told me that we were out of paper for the cockpit printer. I didn't know there was a printer in the cockpit, and the dude had to literally show me the printer so that I could believe him. Send the apprentice to get the wire stretcher. Have the apprentice hold a bucket under a cut cable to catch the extra amps that leak out. It's a bucket of ohms to hold all the voltage drops. My grandpa said when they were teenagers, they'd dial random numbers and claim to be calling from the phone company, saying the company was cleaning the lines, and would instruct the person on the other end to put their handset in a plastic bag, for the next 6 hours, to catch all the dust, so it didn't make a mess in their house. My grandpa lived telling the story, about calling local shops, saying, he was from AT&T. He'd be cleaning the connections, so, please don't pick up the phone for 5 minutes. 4 minutes later, he'd call back, they'd answer, and he'd give out his best, guy getting electrocuted, scream. When I worked at Pizza Hut in the 90s, we would send the new driver to another Pizza Hut, to get our cheese grater. We would call ahead, and that store would send them to KFC, KFC would send them to Burger King. I don't recall it going farther than that. We had the dough repair kit at Papa John's. Had a driver from another store show up for it, and I told them he was being effed with and he quit on the spot. I don't blame him either, LMAO. Yeah, it's one thing to do it to a store employee there hourly and get compensated for driving, since it's out of their normal capacity. The actual drivers in this situation just get shafted pay and time, don't blame them either, LOL. Working at a McDonald's in the mid to late 1990s, we'd sent the new employees out into the lobby to water the numerous plants in the entire seating area. They were all fake plants. Mop the freezer. We did this at McDonald's too. They'd always rush back to us, the mop froze to the floor. Aluminium magnets, left-handed screwdriver, for the left-handed thread. I worked at a factory that pulled the aluminium magnet thing. The best part was, everyone was on it. When new guy came up to you, you'd say, "Oh, I gave that to Bill, who's on the other side of the building." Walk over to Bill. "Oh, I put that back in the supply room. On the other side of the building, supply room guy, Mary just checked that out, she's somewhere far away." You get where this is going. They had one guy going, for over an hour. For the military version of this, has a new guy, who knows the joke ever, just said, "Yes, sir," and then gone off effing around, for a few hours. Yes. In 1977, I was sent to get a bucket of striped paint. I was a 19-year-old airman general hand, working in an RAF fighter squadron, and was treated as if I was a fool. I took the order, goofed off in the airmen's barracks for 2 hours, had a snooze, and watched TV, and eventually returned with a tin of yellow paint. I scrounged from the paint shop boys. The corporal I was taking orders from asked about the stripes. I replied, "They only have yellow stripes." I was still treated as if I was a fool, but I had my petty revenge. We had this know-it-all E4, who had gotten promoted at school, and our ship was his first command. He shows up, and is just generally being a pain in the ass, but he had heard most of the usual fool's errands, roll of flight line, exhaust samples, ID-10T form, etc., so, we knew, we needed something good. Enter our wizened E6LPO. Dude starts talking to this kid about troubleshooting. The kid is, of course, an expert in all things mechanical, electronic, electrical. Dude tells him about this issue our colleagues in engineering are having with their Chang, that it's malfunctioning, suspects that it's a mechanical issue, and asks the kid if he can calibrate a torque wrench, and head down to engineering to tighten the nuts on the Chang. Kid is fired up, "Sure thing, petty officer." Dude gives the kid a little 10-pound torque wrench, and tells him to calibrate it, then head down a few decks to get to work. About an hour later, the kid comes back up to the shop, absolutely mortified. He found out that the Chang was the ship's chief engineer, and he told him to come back with the biggest wrench he had, because his nuts were huge. I don't know if there is something like that in my profession, MEP and building engineer, but one of my professors told a story when he first got out of school and got a job, and the first thing they asked him to do was figure out the transformer to feed a panel. So, he spent the next few hours calculating turn ratio, iron core thickness, and other parameters of a transformer. Wrote it all down, and took it to the senior engineer to review his work. The senior engineer took one look at what he did, pulled a catalog off his shelf, this was before the internet, opened it up, and pointed to a transformer available to buy. "That's all you need to do," he said. I know it's a chuckle of an anecdote, but I find that situation too often. People designing things to their exact use, and customized dimensions, fit to the exact purpose, when there's an off-the-shelf product that works just as good, for like 25% the cost. No need to re-engineer everything. 2 cans of steam. My buddy confused the heck out of a trainee in the kitchen during a rush by frantically telling him to go and get 2 cans of steam from the back. We asked a food runner trainee to get us a bucket of steam, during dinner rush, and he went and filled a bucket with hot water, and poured the hot water out. There was steam left in the bucket. Not a restaurant, but was in food service in high school. One guy loved asking newbies to get him a bucket of steam. One finally ran a bucket through the dishwasher upside down, and brought it to him like that, so it was filled with steam. Jump up and down, on top of an army tank, to check the shocks. Also, walk around it, and hit it with a mallet, to check for soft spots. Done, the soft spots in the armor trick. Came back to find the MRAP just covered in circles, with notes scribbled next to them. Dude took his assignment a little too seriously. This was the same guy I put on satellite watch that actually managed to spot the ISS as it passed overhead. I like to write on a piece of paper, "Help, I'm stuck in the copy machine," and scan to email from a central unit to a co-worker's inbox. Alternatively, I just write it on a piece of copy paper and put it back in the hopper, so it shows up on someone's print job. There's also the trick of putting up a sign near the copier that says, "This copier is now voice-activated," with some example phrases. Quick, go get the left-handed chopping board, or, quick, I need the left-handed knife. Or my favorite, why don't you go chop up some flour? Left-handed knives actually do exist. One example are Japanese culinary knives that are ground opposite of normal, as they have a chisel edge when viewed straight on, and can only effectively cut when held in the proper hand, as opposed to a regular knife that has bevel angles on both sides of the blade, and can be used in either hand. Rock climbing guide. I constantly get people asking how I get the ropes up. My co-workers and I all have different answers, varying from "there's a ladder" or "elevator" in the back of the rock, to "we retrained old mail carrier pigeons," or "grappling hook." I've had a shocking amount of people who will walk around to look for a ladder, then glare at me later, once they realized the joke on them. So, how do you get the ropes up? Just free climb up there, with a rope attached, and hang it? They climb by attaching themselves to the rock as they go. They climb up, placing specially designed anchors in crevices and cracks in the rock. They are connected to a rope that goes up with them, attach an anchor, climb up further, attach another anchor, and then you can't fall very far. This is called trad climbing. In practice, routes that require trad climbing to set often simply remain trad-only routes. Source: my sister, a rock climbing guide. Ah, yes, such things are rite of passage in the military. I have sent people, and been sent myself, to supply for a variety of things, such as an ID-10T, ID-10T, a 1100 NSD rings, balloon strings, a length of flight line, a roll of fallopian tube, a bucket of prop wash, a tube of squelch grease, muffler bearings, chemlight batteries, rear view mirror fluid, a box of ground guides, a bag of grid squares. I've also given the new guy a hammer, a piece of chalk, and told him to find all the soft spots in the armor of an MRAP, and given people a box of trash bags, and sent them into the motor pool to take exhaust samples. The one that really got me into trouble, though, was when I sent someone around the operations center to collect the IMHO report. That stands for early morning hard-on. The major in charge of operations didn't think it was funny at all, and almost brought me up on several counts of SH charges. I was 23 and stupid. My platoon sergeant was able to talk her down from that, but I was in the professional doghouse for months afterward. When I was in year 10, my maths teacher made a big show of not being able to get the projector screen to stay down, and sent me to the teacher's lounge to ask for a long wait. Well played, sir, and I deserved that. We had some cadets from Annapolis accompany us on a pre-deployment exercise to give them a taste of the fleet and what combat training was like. All of the head shed was up on the hill, watching each team go into the village and clear to the HVT house. We roll up in our vehicles and get out to start moving up to the HVT house. While in the vehicle, I told Annapolis that he needs to be in front of the guy with the minesweeper and roll towards the house like a steamroller. That way, if we hit a nide, the guy with the minesweeper can move up to him and provide aid. After all, if the guy with the minesweeper gets hit by nide, how can we clear up to him to provide aid? We could potentially lose the whole team before even getting to the HVT's door. We get out of the car, and instantly, Annapolis gets out of the lead vehicle, and starts steamrolling towards the front door. The point man is behind him, sweeping the ground for IEDs. We make it roughly 20 meters, before I hear over the headset, V3-2, this is V. Actual. What the F are you doing? Everyone laughed, except the commanding officer and Annapolis. I am sure, Annapolis is a high-ranking officer somewhere now, with an absolute hatred of Marines. Our team spent rest of the training exercise, bear crawling to, and up, the nearest hill. Worth it. Team bonding achieved. Edit. Long range 203 rounds. Brown star clusters. IR smoke grenades. In Germany, a spirit level is called Wasserage, water scale. So, the kids are sent out to get the Ausgleichgewicht, balancing weights, for the Wasserage. But I'm glad that my company doesn't allow that shit. You got a little kid in front of you. That kid is 16 or 17 or 18. They are nervous as F. No need to take them down even more, just because it gives you a warm fuzzy feeling of being smarter. If that's what you are aiming for. Seems like a sad life. Be a mentor, don't be an a-hole. Surgeon here. We peel tissue off bones and cartilage, with various name types of elevators, to elevate tissue. So, we'd ask new scrub techs to pass an Otis elevator. That's the company that makes regular elevators in buildings. My favorite was this. Surgeon, pass me the medium handway. Deck, what's a medium handway? Surgeon, about 3 pounds. Go get the sterile ice, is also a good one. When I was a nurse on orientation in the OR, I would double check with other coworkers I could trust to ask about a surgical instrument. Every once in a while, the surgeon would try to trick me, and the trusted coworker would giggle. Great thread. I was hoping there would be some medical references. Here are two that I recall from my career as a physician. One was to write an order in the patient's chart to collect a standing stool velocity. And the second anecdote was not meant to be a snipe-fine prank, but hilariously turned out to be one. An order had been written in the chart by the attending, to wit, get patient on commode, once up in bed. Later on that shift, my future wife enters the room to find her coworker standing up on the patient's bed, in a panic, attempting to balance the patient, who is precariously sitting on the commode chair. Suffices to say, that particular nurse went on to become an administrator. Not a word of a lie. In the Marines, you'd send the noobs to find the Humvee keys, push-button start, or the PRC-E7. The latter was a play on the PRC-77, pronounced Prick 77 and E7, the pay grade for a gunnery sergeant. Basically, you're sending the dude to get yelled at by an agitated higher-ranking fellow, who he's going to call a prick. I got that once, but knew the game. Went to the gunny, hey gunny, Sergeant so-and-so said, to ask you for a prick E7, since you'd know where one is. Saw this joke in another thread. At the height of World War II on the Eastern Front, a high-level meeting takes place in the Kremlin, between Stalin and the marshals, on the situation on their respective fronts. When the meeting ends, Marshal Georgy Zhukov is the first one to step out. As he does so, he mutters under his breath, "Effing a hole with a mustache." It just so happens that Stalin's secretary, Alexander Poskrovyshev, hears this. So, being a loyal servant to the cause, he reports it to his boss. Stalin then orders Zhukov brought back. 2 minutes later, Zhukov is back in the room, facing Stalin. "Comrade Zhukov," begins Stalin, "would you please repeat what you said when you left the room?" "I said, effing a hole with a mustache, Comrade Stalin." "And who did you have in mind when you said it?" "Why, Comrade Stalin, Hitler of course." Stalin then turns to Poskrovyshev. "And you, Comrade Poskrovyshev, who did you have in mind when he said it?" "Waffle House. Or any restaurant really. Regular omelets, use eggs, whipped in a high-speed blender. Got a new cook? After training the regular way, ask them to make an egg white omelet, with no further instructions. And now they know how to make fried meringue. Meringue, unless those eggs were Dancy boys. I'm confused though, because the egg white omelet is a thing. It's not that silly, compared to a mechanic asking for a bucket of elbow grease, for instance. In anesthesia, sometimes, we ask the patient, "Let me know when you're asleep." Ha! In my surgery, earlier this month, I beat them to it. They said something like, "You're going to be falling asleep in a few moments," and I said, "Cool, I'll let you know when I'm asleep." I'm sure the anesthesiologist has heard it all. But the nurse, that was overseeing a bunch of the stuff, got a little chuckle out of it. I think. Memory hazy. Recently they told me the setup to a joke, and promised to tell me the punchline when I woke up. Never saw them again. Asked my friends and doctor about it. Nobody knew anything about a joke. Glass hammer. When I got my first apprentice job in manufacturing, the person I was shadowing sent me to the manager's office to ask for one. He was in the middle of a meeting, so I knocked on. He waved me in, and I asked for it, in front of about 7 fully experienced upper management people. They all looked at me for a second, and then burst out laughing. When I worked in restaurants, we would haze the new people by having them empty the water out of the coffee machine that was connected to the water supply. We'd usually let them go for about 10 minutes or so. If they were smart, they figured it out. It was a good way of seeing who was going to be a high-functioning member of the team. I'm a nurse, and used to work in hospitals. We had little biohazard bags that we would use to send tubes of blood and other assorted bodily fluids to the lab for tests. I had a fellow nurse who would blow a bag full of air and label it "fart sample," then give it to an unsuspecting unit secretary. One poor secretary failed to find any fart test orders in the computer and asked us how to enter it in. So, in cinematography, the iris of a lens is measured in t-stops, photography measures them in f-stops. There is a nuanced difference between the two, but they're pretty much interchangeable. New people usually get the "bring me a box of t-stops" or "I need a bottle of t-stop fluid." Neither of these exist. One of my mentors, early in his career, was working on a shoot on an aircraft carrier, and was hit with the "bottle of t-stop fluid" order, and being the eager young camera PA he went looking for it. Of course, it was nowhere to be found in lockup, and no one would tell him it didn't exist. He eventually finds himself standing next to a group of flight mechanics, whom he mistook as a grips. He says something along the lines of, "They're asking me to find a bottle of t-stop fluid, but I can't find it anywhere." One of the mechanics responds, "T-stop fluid? Oh, I have a bunch of that. Hold on," and grabs him a bottle of t-stop fluid. Apparently, while it isn't something that is used in filmmaking, it is something that exists for use in fighter jets or something. The look of bewilderment on the cinematographer's face when my mentor handed him a bottle of t-stop fluid must have been hilarious. This was a few decades ago. I don't think this type of hazing is allowed on set anymore. That said, I have heard early in my career, find a long wait. Also, if you ever ask a film crew what they're shooting, a lot of the time they're going to tell you that they're shooting a mayonnaise commercial. It's sort of an inside joke, but really it's just a catch-all to tell looky-loos something, when more often than not, they're either too busy to actually give an answer, or are working on something that is using a codename, where if someone recognized the actual project, it could pose a security risk. I manage chemists for the new employees. My team and I have a ritual whenever we have a new person that we go all in on the PPE for the first day. Tyvek suits, arm guards, long gloves, splash shields, foot covers, and solvent masks. The works. The next day, the new person fully gowns up and enters the lab to find everyone in regular lab coats and safety glasses. Always good for a laugh, and serves an additional purpose as training for the new tech and ongoing training for the team, who I need to make sure are confident in using the higher level PPE when it counts. Worked in a sandwich shop in college. When an order was ready, we'd have someone call out the customer's name and deliver the sandwich in the dining area. Anytime we got a new guy during busy hours, we'd put a pickle spear in a basket and tell him it was for Derek. We would then watch the poor guy walk around the busy dining room yelling, "Pickle for Derek." Fun fact: I know a guy who started a company selling blinker fluid just to make a buck off people who still think this is funny. He gets angry email messages from senior mechanics all the time who made the mistake of telling the new guy to get blinker fluid, only for the new guy to realize they didn't have any, and to ask purchasing to order a pallet load. Apparently, this extremely specific scenario happens enough for him to drive a current year car.